Hi. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I never thought I'd get a chance to say that because not many people give TED Talks for a start. Not many people have the chance to do this, so I'd like to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity. And so today, I'm going to be I'm going to be going through the reasons we're pessimistic, the consequences of us being pessimistic, and how you can stop being pessimistic, and how you can prevent your future from looking like mine, which is going to likely end up me watching The Office for the 10th time, eating bougie mix alone in my bed. I really make myself look appealing on here, don't I? Okay. So the first main cause I'd like to give you, this is going to sound like the most cliche cause possible, but September 11th, 2001. What we saw was a wave of media pessimism. Sensationalism was widespread, scapegoating became the new norm. People thought, what could be worse, and why won't things get better, because things have already gone in the figurative toilet. And due to the New Zealand landscape's growing Americanization, this wave of pessimism actually hit us as well. What we saw was a widespread wave of news outlets constantly reporting on the worst. And I challenge you to look at news reports from, let's say, 1990 and look at one from 2004, and you'll see completely different tones in the way that they speak. And although 9/11 did have a massive impact, it wasn't the major trigger cause. And that title of that major trigger cause goes to the Great Recession of 2008. While 9/11 caused media pessimism, the recession caused global and personal pessimism. 8.8 million jobs were lost in the USA, and employment in New Zealand doubled from 4% to 8.5%. And what this did was this instilled media pessimism. People were just completely unhappy with their lives. And groups of people had deeply ingrained cynicisms, which kind of just lingered with us to this day. And we didn't see it at the time, but what we saw was a complete cultural shift from the optimism that we saw to the pessimism of today. And as someone who was born in the millennia, I've been entirely used to living my entire life with this pessimism almost ingrained into me. For some of you older audience members, you can remember a time when people weren't as pessimistic as they were. But these times are rapidly shifting. What we see is the Democratic Party of America, which is supposedly the Progressive Party. Over half of these people think life was better 50 years ago than it is today. And that's a shocking stat, because 50 years ago, a lot of women didn't have the right to get an abortion. Women didn't have the right to go out and get the same jobs men did with the same pay. Black people were still in separate communities and had to access different facilities. And for a socially progressive group to say life was better in those times than it is today really highlights a pessimism which has become normalized. And you might be asking, what's wrong with cynicism? Because it's basically just realism. If you expect the worst, you're going to be positively surprised. I used to think the same way. What I used to think was, because if I just expect I'm going to get a not achieved, if I get an achieved, then you know what? At least I passed. And I'm sure that's a lot for practically every NCEA student, where if you expect yourself to get a not achieved and you get an excellence, you've succeeded. If you get a not achieved, what you've done is, at least I've met my expectations, because there's literally nothing worse. This pessimism may seem normal, and it might seem okay to have this, but it has two consequences which we seem to just look over, and these problems get worse. And these two main consequences are disenfranchisement and the normalization of these depressive circumstances. When your children in the audience, or if you already have children, when your children's children, when the next generation is born, they'll be surrounded by pessimism as we normalize it in our society. What we'll be seeing is pessimism, cynicism, negativity are all regular outlooks to have on life, where it would be essentially raising our children to believe that being negative is normal. And this has massive consequences in ourselves, because if we raise our children this way, we're going to see a rising amount of disinterest in participating in society. What's the point of voting if it'll just negatively affect me? What's the point of participating in helping others when it doesn't give me a benefit? All of this is happening. Why won't it benefit me in the short run? Why should I do this? What's the point in this life? Why do I choose to live this life? This might seem like a straw man with a lot of hypotheticals involved, but this type of existential dread thinking is a lot more common than you'd think. And I've had like as many existential crises as I have fingers. Like, I can't imagine like my life without thinking about things are going to go wrong and I can't do anything to solve them. And that's a main consequence of pessimism. By raising our children in a shroud of negativity, we are reinforcing that negative, self-centered thinking. We reinforce the idea if there's no visible benefit, there's no reason to do it. We reinforce youth disenfranchisement in society, which leads to much more negative consequences like rising rates in depression, a fall in productivity, and what we're going to be seeing is a generally less interested society, and one that almost refuses to act by societal norms, which we've seen in the past. I'd like to take you to, let's say, the 1920s. 1920s, there was a complete boom going on in society. Like, if you were, like, the elite, which in our case is basically the middle class and up, your life was amazing. You could go out on your yacht and you could just live life. And even if you didn't have that, the growing, like, perspective that you could have this really integrated almost a belief that you can be anything. And what we saw was the perception of the American dream, and in New Zealand circumstances, the New Zealand dream. What we saw was people really believing that they could push up and become the upper echelon of society. As we've grown up and as we've let media negativity and our own social and personal pessimisms take over our life, what we see is a lack of what we would call pushing up, breaking the ceiling. We see a lack of productivity, and we see a lack of people actually being interested. So I'd like to ask, what can we do? Luckily for you, I have the answers, and that's why I'm giving a TED Talk. Now, I've chosen to give you the approach of giving you tangible advice because you can implement this in your life right now. Yes, every single one of you. This isn't advice exclusive for people who are born past 2000. You could be born in 1920 and this advice would reign true. And I'm not going to advocate for like government action because Jacinda Ardern is not in the audience as far as I'm aware. And she's not saying, you know what, Ryan, you can do this. I'm going to add a law which means you're not allowed to be sad. I'm advocating for things that all of you can do right now. And yes, I sound like Jordan Peterson or any other self-help professional. But that's kind of what you need to do to get through to people. I've chosen to go for 3-step guide because 3 is a nice whole number. I could give you 50 steps on like just benefiting your life and going through life as you could, but that would be boring and no one wants to listen to me talking about, you know, you could do this. No, I'm going to give you 3 pieces of tangible advice you could actually add into your life right now. And the first one is don't treat assumptions as facts. The reason for this is negativity actually thrives in assumptions, and assumptions go one of 4 ways, and I'm going to use the excuse of my exams as like this example. So if I assume I'm going to get a not achieved and I get a not achieved, I'm kind of just like, I got a not achieved. That was expected because I told myself I'm going to get a not achieved. That's a bad assumption. If I say, oh, yep, I'm going to get a not achieved and I get an excellence, I'm still going to be thinking, you know what, I could have done better. And even though I got the highest possible grade, I still thought of myself as not being able to achieve to that aspiration. That's a negative circumstance. And let's say I kill that exam and I get an excellence and I think I'm going to get an excellence. That's the only good thing. When you think something good will happen and it doesn't, you feel a wave of disappointment that's matched by literally nothing. The worst feeling in the world is not living up to your own expectations. Believe me, I do this constantly. And the solution is just don't assume things. And I know brains make assumptions no matter what. It's a survival strategy. If you see a shadow and you're like, oh, yep, that's a tiger, it's going to eat me. That's your caveman ancestors telling you, yeah, things that are shadows and things that sound weird are normally going to kill you. But we live in 2018. Tigers don't lurk the streets of Huber Street waiting for people. I hope. And we've kind of evolved past a need to assume that someone's going to be a mass murderer and take everything, I think, hopefully. I hope we all live in a society where we can say, you know what, yep, I'm not going to get murdered in my bedroom alone at night. And in the same vein, we should live in a world where it's okay to like say, I don't know what's going to happen, but this is going to happen maybe, and that's a good thing. And you got to take every situation as it comes and roll with the punches, because what this does is build resilience. And resilience is essentially the kryptonite of pessimism, because what negativity is it just feeds off your own insecurities. By refusing to take assumptions as fact, you're taking unnecessary negativity off yourself, and you're like one step ahead to improving your life. The second piece of advice that I'll give you is don't take everything to heart. And the things other people do and the things that happen around you aren't always because of you. Every action has a reaction, but your actions may not cause what you think are reactions, because what other people do is essentially a projection of their own reality. That fact tripped me up so hard when I read that for the first time. I was like, whoa, other people don't just live as my side characters in my story. People have their own lives. How dare they? But, that's what happens. And other people, yes, actually have their own lives. Other people have their own destinies. And everyone is the main character in their own unwritten story. People aren't just waiting there to be a little side character in your story to give you a piece of advice. And by following this piece of advice that I've given you, By following this piece of advice that I've given you, essentially what you're doing is giving yourself a shield from negativity, because negativity spreads from person to person like a disease, and not taking everything to heart is like a vaccine for this. By not taking everything to heart, what you're essentially doing is making sure that other people's words aren't affecting you, and your own actions are the ones that you control, because you control your own destiny. And that's the one thing I want you to come away with. Chances are you are not going to remember me after this talk. I'm going to be very real with you, because I've watched TED Talks in school and I can't remember most of them. Let's be real. But if there's one thing I hope you remember, I hope it's not the fact that I'm stuttering over literally every word. I hope it's the fact that that first speaker after the break, he told me don't take everything to heart. I hope that's what you remember me by. The third and final step it's in Latin, and this is the furthest my white self has been to a different culture. So, this third step, it's in Latin, and it's carpe diem quam minimum credula postero, and this basically translates to YOLO, and I could have just said YOLO, but then you'd look at me like I'm a year 8, which I hope you're not already doing. And so it essentially translates exactly, actually, to live in the moment as the future is untrustable. And what I said basically sounds like a poster you could get at Countdown for $2. But, it's true. And it's the one step which really turned my life around. Me and so many other high schoolers especially fall into a trap of uncertainty, because believe me, I've spent hours alone in my room planning my entire life out, and when I get a not achieved and I'd realize I'm not going to go to Harvard and become a brain surgeon, I just collapse. So many other people have the exact same problem as me. You plan your entire life out step by step by step. And when one of those steps falls, your entire life falls apart. And you're like, well, looks like I'm not becoming an author. McDonald's it is. And by focusing on your future, you ignore your present. And I know this sounds like another poster you could get at Kmart, but live in the moment. Don't fixate yourself on an uncertain fate, because what you're doing is ignoring the moments that actually matter. I'm going to sound a lot like a guidance counselor here. Live in the moment. Put your phone down for 10 minutes a day. Reflect, journal, listen to music, read books, think about life, find friends, spend time with people you love. We're alive for 40 million minutes approximately, and it takes 5 of those minutes for your entire life to change. And my life has changed maybe 60 times. I used to want to be an astronaut. Joke's on me, I'm colorblind. I can't be an astronaut. I wanted to be a brain surgeon. Joke's on me, I only got Achieved endorsed last year. I'm not being a brain surgeon. My life and career has changed basically every 3 weeks as I think about what I actually want to do with my life. And I'm sure all of you other people in the room have had the same problem as me. You change careers on average 3 times in your life. You can't focus on a future which you've planned out for yourself, because the future is untrustable. If you spend your whole life thinking something will happen and it doesn't, you'll be like me, sitting alone in your room watching The Office. Again. We're alive for 40 million minutes, and it takes 5 of those to change your life. And your life will change probably 60 to 100 times per year as different events happen. And if you look at the 30 million minutes in your future, you're ignoring the 20 minutes that have actually happened around you. If you keep looking in your future, what you're going to be seeing is a lack of being able to comprehend your past. And what you're going to be seeing is not being able to actually look at yourself and say, this is what I want to do. Fixating your future on a single fact will basically mean you don't get that. At the start of my talk, I told you my topic was how to raise an optimistic child in a pessimistic world. And you're all probably confused because I don't think I've used the word child apart from like 20 seconds in. And the truth is, again, I am not a parenting expert. I don't understand children. I don't want children. Children frustrate me. Children, they don't know how to use a bathroom. They have the mental capacity of literal 4-year-olds because that's what they are, 4-year-olds. But I know one thing about children because I've been a child for most of my life. And that's your kid will seek to emulate you. And that's why I've given you 3 steps, because you can't force these steps on your child. You're not going to be sitting your kid down and saying, you know what, I went to a TED talk today, and now your life is going to revolve around doing a Rubik's Cube for 5 hours a day until you're the best at that. That's what I'm going to make my money off. No, what I want you to do is actually emulate what I've given you into your own life, because your kid will emulate you. My dad's in the audience, and I emulate him heavily because he's my idol, essentially. And I do things because my parents do them. I wanted to play basketball. Look at me. Look at me. When I realized that I was not going to grow past 6 foot, I had a breakdown because I know I would never make it into the NBA. It wasn't the fact that I literally look like Chicken Little. It was the fact that suddenly, it was the fact that, no, I'm not going to grow. And I kind of accepted that as time went on. And truth be told, I should have accepted it earlier. When I was 9 years old and like going to hoop club for the first time, I should have realized, I'm not going to make it into the NBA, am I? But I had a dream, and I wanted to play basketball, so I tried my hardest, and turns out I can't play basketball very well. But you know what? That's fine, because I think that I made my dad proud by just trying to be him. And so I've given you 3 steps. To improve your child's life, the best thing you can do is improve yours. And I'm saying 90% of you will forget the specifics of my talk as soon as you leave the room. Like, let's be real. Most of you will probably remember the jokes I've told and maybe one of my 3 steps, not the fact that I've come up here and spoken to you for nearly 10 minutes about The Office. And so while we go in between speakers, I'd like you to reflect on your pessimism and how you're going to improve that. I'd like you to reflect on, are you just blindly intaking what I say, or are you going to think about it? Remember, we're only alive for 40 million minutes, and I hope this 15 has really helped you. Thank you.